Good morning, Dale. You need to unmute yourself, I think. Anyway, welcome. I'm Peter Stalker, the chairman of the board. I would like to call this meeting to order. We have all 5 of our directors, 4 present in this room, and Dale is here by Zoom. I would take a motion to approve the December agenda. A motion.
I will so move.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have approved the agenda. Next item is the approval of the November 18th, 2021 regular board meeting minutes. I will move to approve the minutes from the November 18th, 2021 regular board meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next item on the agenda is public comment. We have public comment, but it is related. We have 2 comments. Yeah, this is open. We have 2 public comments that have been made, which we'll talk about, and this is open now for public comments. Anybody online would like to comment, raise their hand or wave. I can't see that.
It doesn't look.
There are a couple of people to it.
She keeps me in line. I can't read that.
Gail's waving her hands if she was.
Dale, do you have something you want? I mean, she frozen up there?
No, she's not. No, she's there. Well, you might want to ask.
I'm going to ask again if there's any public comment. This is the time to make it, please. Hearing none, let's move on, please. Correspondence report.
There was none.
There was none.
Except for the 2 public comments that will come up later.
All right. We are now going to move into the staff report, library fund management and accounting services.
Okay. As we mentioned at the November meeting, the library's contract with Teton Accounting was up for renewal because of their recruiting difficulties. They were unable to continue the level of service that we have with them at this time. They said they were willing to take on the full package of accounts receivable and payable that we would need. The cost for that was approximately $51,000 per year, and it was a 2-year contract. So being financially responsible, the administrative services manager and I wanted to see what other options were out there for us. Those options included staying with Teton, expanding our level of services with them. We reached out to, we have a relationship with Cumulus Accounting, another local firm. They've been hosting, managing the hosting of our QuickBooks. So we reached out to them to see what services they could take on, and they are also having staffing difficulties. So they were not willing to even propose any level of service for us. So then we looked at virtual accounting firms. Most of the online firms that we looked at do not do accounts payable, which is one of the big pieces that we kind of need help with. And there are a couple that do government type services, but once you talk to them about the Wyoming voucher system, it's beyond their business model, so they're not willing to take on that kind of to service that way. So that leaves us with our third option, which was to transfer funds management and accounting services over to the Teton County clerk and treasurer to do that. And so we have met with them, looked at what the processes would look like. And well, I'll say our recommendation is, after exploring all the options, that's where the administrative services manager and we would recommend that we make that transfer. We are on a time crunch, which is a bit of a problem. It has to be done by January 1st. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but that is the recommendation we would like to make. And then you've read the report, but I would like to open it up for questions. I believe we have both the clerk and treasurer and county attorney online, so they are here to help answer questions that might come up. So I would entertain.
Kip, could you please talk a bit to the special funds
Yes.
aspect of this? I think it's something that needs to be talked about.
Okay, so the way the transfer would happen would be the library's operating budget and funds and the reserve funds that we have for building maintenance and such would be transferred into a special reserve fund, which the library currently has a special reserve fund for payroll purposes. When we shifted over our payroll services to the county, a special reserve fund was created. And under, I guess it's federal law, a special reserve fund is set aside. The funds within that fund can only be used for a specific purpose. In this case, it would be the library. And under statutory Wyoming statutes, the library board continues to have that responsibility of those funds. And so only the board gets to decide how those funds are used.
So both statute and what else puts up guardrails?
I'm gonna actually ask Abigail if she could explain that for us.
But where the guardrails exist?
Are you muted, Abigail?
So is that Grace Robertson Grace asking that?
Yes, Abigail.
All right, and I'm sorry, the sound's not great from you guys. It's adequate, it's good, but the question is about guardrails.
Yes.
Okay, so, under Wyoming statutes, the library board clearly is in charge of the library funds. And then that's under Wyoming law regarding the library and its control over its own funds once they've been allocated to the library board. Two, they're the statutes regarding a special fund that is set up for a special purpose that can only be used for whatever the special purpose was it was set out for. And those are both, and then the next level is that people know, but to remind people that the Teton County Clerk and the Teton County Treasurer are independently elected bodies who follow their mandates under state law as well as other law. And they take those, roles very seriously. So they would follow the law on both the library fund being in charge of its fund, as well as the law dictating that special funds are to be used for that purpose. So for all of those reasons, and then we've had a lot of discussions on what the actual procedure would look like, where the library board would vote to spend its money the way it always has, with a voucher with the supporting documentation attached. And then that document would be sent over to the admin building and the Teton County Clerk's office to process, while the Teton County Treasurer would be holding the funds. So in essence, what I have generally, when I'm talking about this, is the Teton County Treasurer is acting as your bank. The treasurer holds your money, and just like your bank sends you bank statements of how much is in and how much was spent, they don't control how it was spent. They just send you a report saying this is how you chose to spend your money, like a bank statement. While the Teton County clerk is in essence operating as your bookkeeper, where you tell your bookkeeper, pay these bills, and then they go issue the checks, or, under the statutes, they're referred to as warrants. So I think all of those act as guardrails. And I, can take any questions on that.
Thank you.
From internally, from the library staffing perspective, we have QuickBooks that we're operating under.
Correct.
What's your plan, your team's plan on a forward-going basis? Ongoing basis. Same thing.
Well, essentially, it would not change on our end. We are having, like everyone else, difficulty filling our administrative assistant position, which will be vacated at the end of this year. But in talking to HR, what our options are with regard to the position itself. In other departments, it's an administrative assistant who is continuing to do their books. So we would look at leaving that position as it is, and hopefully maybe in the new year, we're able to recruit. We have not been successful in the past 3 months, but the processes for the library would not change. We will continue to create the vouchers, enter them into QuickBooks, because the reporting from the county clerk is not as detailed as the board would like to see. We would continue to generate the reports for the board meeting out of QuickBooks so that you could see the greater details.
And my understanding is we would no longer be physically signing checks, so the treasurer's job would be slightly different as well.
Right.
You'd be reviewing, but not, he or she would be reviewing.
The library treasurer would come in, review the vouchers, sign, and test that those are correct. The board would then vote on the vouchers at the meeting, as they always do. And then after the meeting, somebody at the library will physically take the vouchers over to the clerk's office, where they will process those. And I'm going to ask Maureen to address some of the process, because I know that there's been some discussion on how, making the library vouchers distinct from other vouchers that are coming through your office.
Hi, thanks, Kip. Thanks, members of the board. Maureen Murphy, Teton County Clerk. So the way we do it now is, well, the way we will do it with yours is we will add them into our run for the week of the whenever. If you have your board meeting on a Thursday and bring us your vouchers, Jason, our accounts payable worker, she will put them together, they'll be in our purchase journal, but the Board of County Commissioners won't be approving them. So I know Abigail and I spoke yesterday about, we will just put in the motion that they are approving the amount for the county, not the library expenses. So they'll be in the report and they'll be in the voucher run, but they won't be approved by the Board of County Commissioners as you have the approval for the library board.
Dale?
And then the checks get cut that Monday. So if we get them Thursday, the checks will be cut Monday and they'll go out that day.
Thanks.
Does that answer your question?
You answered it for me.
And to reiterate, the library already does have a special fund set up, as we are doing the payroll already. So that fund is already set up. We're just going to add accounts to it, like your breakdown of accounts.
Dale?
Guys, the sound is really not very good. It's hard to hear you. So maybe, I don't know what to suggest, except maybe you could speak up a little. Can you hear me?
Perfectly well.
Okay, so I have a few questions. I'm a little fuzzy on the administrative assistant position, are we thinking that this transfer to the county would be temporary until we could hire someone in-house?
No. We would have to hire an accountant to do our reconciliation, to do our QuickBooks reconciliation, like we're doing now, and we don't have the administrative assistant position would not have those skills, that skill set. So we would, that's not what the administrative assistant would do.
Okay, well, I have a job description here that I got as part of the board packet that seems to indicate the administrative assistant would do that.
They're doing the basic bookkeeping, they're not doing, it's what the administrative assistant does now. And then Torrent Accounting is doing our checkbook reconciliation, our, any adjustments that need to be done, and generating the reports.
Okay.
Reports. So we would not be able to have an administrative assistant do that work.
So would we, so I'm still confused. Would we then cease to recruit for an administrative assistant?
No, we still need an administrative assistant to do the basic bookkeeping and all of the other duties that the administrative assistant is currently doing.
Dale?
Okay, so who's gonna do it if we,
Dale, I think the confusion.
yes,
There historically has been, there have been two different entities that have dealt with our accounting. The internal library staff that does the QuickBooks, that does the day-to-day recording of everything that we do. And then the processing of what comes out of that office has gone to an outside accounting firm for at least as long as we've been here to reconcile it and put it into accounting lingo and language and reports for us. And then that stuff is what goes to our auditors at the end of the year to become part of the audit. It has never been a wholly done internal operation or a wholly done outside operation. It had been two pieces. Economically, we've had the administrative assistant handle the day-to-day stuff out of QuickBooks, but they've not had the capability in their training to do that accounting piece. We've needed somebody who has, in essence, a CPA to do the accounting piece. And that's what, it's the county administration that is being proposed to take the place of Torrent Accounting, who has been doing that outside piece for us. Am I describing that correctly?
Very,
Okay.
okay, and I'm not confused about that. That's not my question. I do understand all of that, okay? My question is, we have no administrative assistant. We've had difficulties. What is the county's role going to be? If we're going to switch this over to the county, is the county going to take over both of those duties in the absence of an administrative assistant? That's where I'm a little fuzzy. Who actually is going to do, if we're going to have two separate pieces as we have had, who's going to do that?
the administrative assistant, and or in the interim of having no administrative assistant until we recruit one, Stella will be having to do a lot of that work.
Okay. Another question I have is, in the proposed motion, it says, under suggested motion 1, it says, I move the library transfer its fund management and accounting services as described in this staff report to the Teton County Treasurer and Teton County Clerk and abide by the policies of the Teton County Treasurer and the Teton County Clerk effective January 1st, 2022. My question is, do we know that the policies of those two offices are consistent with library law and what we are required by state statute to do?
Abigail.
I would say, can you answer that, Abigail? I am assuming the policy.
The state statutes, yeah, the state statutes for library control of the funds are pretty simple. It's one sentence that says that the library board is in charge of the funds. So, you know, one of the policies that sort of drove the addition of this language is, for example, the county treasurer has policies for cash handling that the library would then follow, the staff. So it's things like that. And there's no conflict between those sort of routine policies that address the logistics of things, like how the vouchers get filled out and cash handling, and does not conflict with the statutes at all.
I do feel that there would need to be on the part of the library board and probably the county clerk and the county treasurer as well, a continuing education process as our county commission elected officials change, because this is a difference. And I would want us all to be very careful. And I understand we're under the gun about this thing. We can't stop issuing the paychecks, but I think we need to be very careful that all of the elected officials, not just the ones that are directly involved in it, are very aware of how this works, and that the library board is still the governing body over the library and its finances. And I just think that's going to be a continuing effort on the part of this board. And like I say, probably the county clerk and the county treasurer.
Neil, what is your, tell me worst case scenario?
Well, I guess worst case scenario, Maureen could take all the money and go to Mexico, but I'm not really worried about that. I'm concerned about the fact that traditionally we have not done it this way. Libraries, I do believe, because of the differences in the state statutes about their governors, were set up to try to keep them independent in order for them not to become so politicized as different political parties take these elected positions. And I think the more gummed up we get with county government, the harder it is to distinguish that there's a real difference. And that's my concern. And there's a huge learning curve for anybody who becomes an elected official. I don't care what you do, whether you're the county commissioner, the county treasurer, the county, any of those, there's a huge learning curve. And I just think it will be in the community's benefit that we continue, all of us continue to make it very clear that the library has not ceded any independence by entering into this agreement with the county.
Dale, I think if it's okay with everyone, I'll address this because I think those are excellent points. And they actually are something that I talked to with the treasurer and the clerk about as we were trying to figure out the logistics related to the fact that the report for payment of county vouchers through this YCAL system that the entire state uses can't be bifurcated. So the library vouchers will be reflected on that report. So what we did when we were talking about how to address that very issue is the first thing was what was already mentioned, was the motion that the commissioners make when they vote to approve vouchers in their public meetings on Monday will very specifically and explicitly state, you know, we are not voting on those vouchers that have already been approved by the library board, and we will work on the language for that motion. And as we do that, I can share it with the board so they see what the language will be that the commissioners will use that bifurcates the library funds that they're technically not voting on because they have nothing to do with it. Two is the vouchers themselves, and the public won't be as exposed to this, but in terms of exactly to your point about concerns about turnover among the commissioners to make sure that it isn't forgotten or overlooked, is instituting a procedure where after the library board has voted to approve an expenditure and they have their voucher, which will look like this, and with the supporting documentation attached that then will get physically delivered over to the county clerk's office. After you've voted on it, we had talked about getting a big red stamp. So the big red stamp will say approved library board and potentially even the date of the meeting where the library board voted it. So when it's in the stack with the other vouchers, it's really glaringly obvious that that is not within the purview of the Board of County Commissioners. And when this first came up and we were trying to figure out logistically how to manage this, we had a discussion that if hypothetically, a county commissioner, a new one years now or years down the road, were to be looking at these vouchers and say, oh, what's this voucher, for the library to buy pens, at Staples, just as a hypothetical, and that it would be the role, and we take those roles very seriously for both the county treasurer and the county clerk, as well as the county attorney, to point out to the commissioners in that meeting, you don't need to worry your pretty little head about that because that's not yours. And to be honest, sometimes we enjoy telling commissioners things like that. So, so this is something we talked about, and the things that we came up with to guard against that and make sure, and we can brainstorm other ideas as this moves forward, is the language in the motion, the big red stamp on your vouchers, and having the other independently elected officials of Teton County, the clerk, the treasurer, and the county attorney's office there to inform the Board of County Commissioners what, the bifurcation under state law. So.
And good morning. This is Katie Smits, the Teton County Treasurer. I'd also like to state too that the library will be a component unit of the county, and a component unit is what you are now. You're basically a separate legal entity within Teton County. So all of your books are going to be separate. You're going to have a separate audit. Just like you do now. You're in Teton County's final audit, as you have been every year since you've started. So you'll still be in our audit, but you will be a component unit, which I think is a big deal as well. So you can keep that in mind, that it's a separate legal entity within Teton County.
And actually, Katie, can you actually maybe explain to everyone, because I wasn't familiar with that phrase, component unit, and when you used it, I went and spent a little bit of time looking it up, that what's the uniform standards that comes out of, that all governments follow? If you could maybe just speak to that a little bit, I think that would be helpful.
Right. So a component unit is, right, you're a separate entity within the county. You have your own governing board. You have your own audit. You have your own set of accounting, your books. You have your own set of books. Even though you're still within the county, you're still a separate legal entity. So everything is separate.
It's 9 o'clock.
And that phrase comes out of, for everyone's, I don't have it off the top of my head, but there's a standards board that standardizes these types of relationships within, governments, that the county and I believe almost all governments, local, state, whatever, follow. It's a uniform. It's almost like an accounting standard, but I think, more designed for government. I could get some more information on that and provide it to people. So going forward with this decision on the assumption that this, will be approved today, but we can provide more information to explain those standards to members of the board.
And the county does have other component units as well. We have Weed and Pest. We have the Travel and Tourism Board, and then we also have the library as well. So, we have other separate component units as well within the county.
Sean?
I was going to say, with the statute being so clear that the library board has control of these funds, I feel pretty comfortable with this. With that being said, if for whatever reason down the road, if we wanted to extricate ourselves from this arrangement, what would that process be?
Abigail, did you hear that question?
She's talking. We can't hear her.
Oh, sorry.
I'm
Abigail,
sorry, can you repeat the question? I was actually Googling the standards board. I wanted it to be able to share with everyone. So please repeat the question for me.
Sure. I was just wondering if for whatever reason down the road, we wanted to remove ourselves from this arrangement, what would that process be?
So you mean like hypothetically, if you wanted to do this for 1 year because you're in a predicament right now, but you decided to go back to your old system once you were able to identify an accountant?
Sure, or I mean, if the statute changed or for whatever reason, I just want to understand what the process would be.
I think technically the process would just be having a meeting and voting to change it back or change it to something else the same way you are right now, and having a staff report vetting the issues and having it come before the board. There's no statutory mandate for the treasurer and the clerk to perform these duties on behalf of the board. So it's just a courtesy, basically. And anytime you wanted to undo it, you could. So, I mean, we want to keep we wouldn't want to be, it would be problematic over time to, ask the clerk and the treasurer to do this. And then a new board comes in and says, oh no, and we're going to go back. And then 2 years later, you change your mind again. And as a practical and political matter, you're going to irritate the clerk and the treasurer. And I don't mean this board specifically, I mean over time, as a matter of just good practice and policy. But all you would have to do is have a board meeting to change it to something else. Because it is your decision.
I have a question for Maureen. We've had payroll at the county since January 1st. Actually, this is for Kip and Maureen. Have you guys had any issues with processing our payroll and any concerns that have come up with staff internally at the library or from the county side of things as well? So I don't know who wants to answer that first, but
I can go first, and I would just say that at the high level, no, there have been no issues. There have been issues with the processes and trying to it was a new process for us. So trying to work with Maureen and her team to iron those out. I think we're in a really good place now. So I don't think there have been any issues that are notable.
Oh, and I can say this actually will make it a little easier for payroll, because currently we do separate payrolls, and this, since will be coming directly like an inter-fund transfer, it'll be easier for payroll. So, I mean, I can say this process will make it a little easier for Shelley, but no, I don't believe there have been any issues. I mean, it was a learning curve. It was just getting the process figured out, to reiterate what Kip said, but no, it's been pretty seamless since then.
Dale, do you have any other questions?
Not right now. Thank you.
Nina, do you? John?
Nope.
Good. Grace?
If I might, Chairman?
All yours.
Okay, so, yeah, this is the fun part of Zoom meetings. You can not hear the questions while you're Googling things. So it's the Government Accounting Standards Board. It's, GASB is what it's referred to. So, and it's GASB.org. And let's see. The standards are recognized as authoritative by state and local governments on how different entities work. And then one other thing I wanted to read to you real quick is, so a component unit is a legally separate organization for which the primary government officials are financially accountable, or for which the relationship, it goes into that. But if anyone's interested, I would go to the GASP website, gasp.org, which is the standardized rules for how these relationships work and how to maintain those boundaries that that exist in a lot of places under state law.
Is that a P or a B at the end of that?
It's a B, GASB, Government Accounting Standards Board, I think it is.
Thank you. Okay. I think we've come to the time to propose a motion.
We've had two of them before.
Yeah, the first motion is I move that the library transfer its funds management and accounting services as described in this staff report to the Teton County Treasurer and Teton County Clerk, and abide by the policies of the Teton County Treasurer and Teton County Clerk effective January 1st of 2022. Do I have a second for that motion?
I'd like to, well, I'll second it.
Thank you, Dale.
But
Discuss-
I'd also like to add a line, Peter, since we're in the discussion part to the motion.
Yes, absolutely. Now we're in the discussion part.
Okay, so I would like that motion to stand as you read it, and as for a last line, I would like to add, all practices shall adhere to Wyoming state statutes with regard to libraries.
I would ask Abigail, does she have any comment on that?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay. So Dale, would you, I'm happy to amend my motion to incorporate that. If you would read it again, please.
Okay, it would be an additional last line to the motion as you read it. And it would say, all practices shall adhere to Wyoming state statutes with regard to libraries.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The second motion is I move that the library close its first interstate bank accounts and transfer the fund balances to the county treasurer, and I'd add effective immediately.
Peter,
Yeah.
if I could suggest that we use the suggested motion in the report, which says, I move that the library close its first interstate bank accounts, money market and checking, and transfer the fund balances into a special revenue fund with the Teton County Treasurer. And then we could put effective immediately at the end, because your motion did not address the special revenue fund.
I think that's on the, it's implicit, but yes, that makes it explicit. That's fine.
If the process for closing the account will require us to take that motion, have as many board members sign that, and take it to the bank then. So it won't be
Effective as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, Excuse me, I'm gonna restate this thing. I move that the library close its First Interstate Bank accounts and all other accounts, well, that's incorporating all other accounts, and transfer the fund balances to the special purpose fund at the Teton County Treasurer's Office, effective as soon as possible.
Special revenue fund.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Do I have a second of that convoluted motion?
I will second.
Thank you, Sean. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Teton County, for working.
Thank you
with
so
us.
much for taking us on. I know that you guys don't have to do it, and it's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you. So our next agenda item is a proposed intellectual freedom policy. I move to open a public hearing for the purpose of hearing comment on the proposed intellectual freedom policy and request for reconsideration procedure. Do I have a second of that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Oh, I was so much.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any comment, any public comment from anybody that's on? We have 2 pieces of written correspondence. Is there any further public comment? Kip, do you want to address the email public comment, please?
Sure, we received 2 emails from patrons or residents of the county. The first one is from Ruth Elwood, and she wrote, "To me, the idea that we control what people read is scary. A published book that I choose to read should be available at a public library. If a parent does not wish their child to read it, be a parent and restrict it. I do not believe that philosophy. Encourage reading. Thank you for the opportunity to contact you." The other email correspondence was from Rhonda Robles, and she wrote, "Dear Library Board, I support the current and proposed process for dealing with any controversial or contested library materials. I agree that diversity of viewpoints is essential to democracy. Thank you for your attention to this matter. My letter does not require a response. Rhonda Robles, Jackson, Wyoming."
Thank you. I would move to close the public hearing then. Do I have a second of that motion? Excuse me?
You don't let any of these people?
Well, did it, I mean, I asked them if they wanted to, so.
What did you see? Abigail.
Oh, Abigail, do you have you're raising your hand?
No, that was just left over from last time.
Sorry. Your views are wrong.
I'm glad to see someone's paying attention to helping what I call drive the Zoom bus. By washing her hands and whatnot, because it can be very tricky to drive the Zoom bus at the same time you're managing a meeting.
Do I have a second to move to close, to my motion to close the public hearing?
I second.
Thank you.
Great.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Okay. Staff report on the proposed intellectual freedom policy and request for reconsideration procedure. Final staff report. Anything else?
You have seen the final staff report. You have heard the, staff recommendation that you approve this new policy or revised policy. You've heard the public comments. So I would say if you want to make a motion or ask some questions first, or.
Do we have any questions for Kip or staff on this? I do not.
Grace has a
Grace
question.
has.
Okay, Kip, I perceive that you are trying to be clear in these policies, in defining what's policy and staying within those boundaries. And that you are, in this case, distinguishing the procedure from the policy and the way you've laid it out. I appreciate that.
Thank
And I think you're trying to get us into a little more appropriate realm as to what's in our policy. And I see it, and that's good. So I gave you a few typos. It would be really nice, I gave you a little piece of paper with a Post-it note.
Oh,
We need to be really consistent in procedures and process nomenclature so that people can follow things. So I handed you a few
It's here
markups
somewhere.
to this.
okay,
So if we move to approve it, would you consider those, please, the markups?
yeah.
I'm just looking for, yeah, a little more user friendly. And I have one more.
Oh, you didn't change any substantive, so.
No.
It's.
It's
they're
just
just-
administrative, so I think we
yeah,
can
It
proceed
would be fine, yeah.
if you'd like to today. I want to be sure of that, okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and that's all I had. I'll defer.
Would you like to make a motion?
Oh, yes. I move the board adopt the intellectual freedom policy and reconsideration procedure with implementation on January 1st. I'm fixing the title a little bit in that motion.
Yeah.
So it's the policy and the procedure that we're approving here.
I will second that motion. Any discussion? All in favor?
All
Aye.
right.
Aye.
Thank you. Our next item is the consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Yes,
Dale?
I'd like to pull the IT agreement.
Okay, the IT agreement, any other discussion, any other thing to be pulled from the consent agenda? You okay?
Okay.
Okay, let's, the IT agreement then, Dale.
Okay, this is the support agreement for the library between Teton County and Teton County Library. And I would like to ask, not to put you on the spot, Sean, but I guess I'm going to, as I think the board member probably who's the most knowledgeable in this field, if he feels this agreement provides the protection to the library that we need, particularly in regard to patron privacy and any issues that are concerned with those, with that.
Dale, having looked over it, I'm pretty comfortable with the language in it. The one thing that came up to me, but it really is reasonable, was the, if we wish to exit the agreement, having a 6-month run out on that seems maybe a little long, but honestly, it's probably reasonable. So my very short answer is I'm pretty comfortable with this. I think the onus of protecting patron privacy really falls still on library staff. And this doesn't supersede any of that in my mind.
Dale, much of that language is from the current agreement that we had, or that expired in November.
Yes.
So.
No, I understand that this is the final copy, yes. And I did see that there are monthly check-in meetings that include library staff, and I feel that's a very good safeguard also, but I just think that's one of the first of our responsibilities, and we all need to be very careful about making sure that, our agreements cover that. And I'm sure the county at this point also is very aware of that, probably in a way that they weren't when they first started. There is a learning curve anytime you create a new cooperative effort. So thank you, Sean.
I would add, Dale, and you're welcome, that, I mean, in a perfect world, I think it would be, every agency would have its own robust IT staff.
Mhm.
But that, I mean, as we know in Teton County, that is exceedingly difficult, whether it's IT staff or accounting staff or administrative staff or any staff. So maybe someday in the future, things will align in a way that staffing like that is available and realistic for us to have. But in the absence of that, I think this is a great arrangement.
May I ask Dale, do you think it's insufficient? Or do you think it's sufficient, better worded, that item number 3 under collaborative responsibility, doesn't that address your concern, or did you look at the internet use policy and challenges and protection?
Yes, I did. And
So do you think that that's sufficient for a reference there?
well, I think it's sufficient as far as it goes. I mean, I think the agreement as a whole, which outlines individual duties and then cooperative duties, I think all of that is necessary. And that's an important part, certainly, but it has to hang together as a complete agreement. And that's why really I wanted to hear from Sean, because I certainly defer to his expertise. So yes, I think you're right about that, Grace, but I wanted to hear about the entire agreement, and I can certainly, I feel that at this point I can support it. I think that it's good that we do have an option in the future to think about another way to do it, but which is always a good thing. But no, I'm good with it.
Terrific, thank you. Is there any further discussion on the IT agreement? Hearing none, I will move to approve the consent agenda, including the IT agreement, for December 2021. Do I have a second? I'll second. Thank you, Sean. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Director's report.
It's long. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. The October board meeting, when we discussed expanding library hours to Saturdays, the report inadvertently, me typed 10 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock opening in the morning. And so the board had approved what was written. However, we have been operating 9 to 5. So we need to just correct that. And there's a very wordy motion that Abigail helped me write.
All right, well then, I will read that motion, if you don't mind my interrupting your report for
Yes.
doing that. I move that the library's open hours on Saturdays are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And note for the record that these have been the actual open hours of the library since Saturday, November 6th, 2021, following a board motion and affirmative vote on October 21st, 2021, which mistakenly stated that open hours on Saturday would be returned to 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. due to a typographic error. End of sentence. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Yeah, back to you.
The library since August the library board approved of what is called a face covering resolution, the mask requirement to be in the library. The way our resolution was written, it would remain in effect as long as the county is in orange or red level for COVID. Simultaneously, the county commissioners passed a similar resolution that had an expiration date of December 31st. There's no indication that they are going to extend the resolution. I know the schools are saying they will drop their mask requirements at the end of the year, provided the county is also dropping theirs. So that would leave the library in a position of being the only county institution that is continuing to require masks. And it's already sort of burdensome on staff. There's a lot of arguments. You'll see in one of the comments that patron made to a staff member, very unpleasant. And it would only heighten if the library is the only place requiring a mask. So the management team was asked to informally survey their team members for where they would like to see the library go. And while the sentiment overall was that they wish the mask requirement would continue in the county, they realize that it's not going to, and they don't want to be put in a sort of untenable position of enforcing it and getting into arguments. So they would like to see the board rescind their resolution with the library strongly suggesting that patrons wear masks. The library will continue to supply masks at the doors of the building. The sneeze guards will remain in place. We will continue to follow social distancing practices, and staff will either they can ask the patron to wear a mask if they need help, or they can find another staff member. So we want to keep staff as safe and as comfortable as possible, realizing what the environment is we have to live in. So
I have one question about this proposed motion,
yes,
because it is declarative as opposed to conditioned on the Board of County Commissioners.
that's what I was about to ask Abigail that question. One, if you know anything different that the commissioners might have reconsidered, or can we pass a motion that says conditional should only if the county requirement is lifted?
If that's how you would like the motion to read, I don't see anything wrong with that. I have not heard anything indicating that the commissioners are going to extend their resolution. Keith, Keith worked with the commissioners more than I do, but he also knows that this motion is before you folks, so he certainly would have let us all know if he knew of anything that might happen differently at the county level. But so the motion as it is fine, but if you want to add the language that you only drop yours if they drop theirs, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Thank you. Then I would move that should the Board of County Commissioners let their mask the mask face covering resolution expire, that we, the Board of the Library, rescind effective January 1st, 2022, the library face covering resolution dated August 19th, 2021. Do I have a second?
Second, Grace, second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I'm
Motion
gonna
carries.
abstain.
Okay. Thank you, Dale. So we have, the motion passes with one abstention. Is there anything further in your director's report you'd like to talk about?
Sure. Strategic planning, I know is something that we do need to get underway in the next year. I have mentioned several times the Framing the Future project that the state is participating in. That project is delayed at least until March of 2022. But that doesn't mean that we can't start doing some of the early legwork, establishing the framework under which we want to operate for our strategic planning. And one of those things that we need to do is identify a strategic planning team, which would include a lot of folks in the community outside the library. And in order to do that, I think the board needs to have a strategic planning subcommittee that, because of all of your connections to the community, you would help identify what that team might look like. And there would also probably be other work that we would identify for the subcommittee, but that's one of the key pieces, is identifying who we want to have.
Which would be no more than 2 board members so that we can avoid having
Yes,
an official board meeting.
yes.
Okay. So are you asking us to set this committee up at this meeting?
At least consider it so we can get started.
Let's have a discussion about that. I actually think it's a great idea to do so, and I'm happy to raise my hand to be on that group. I just did 2 things, and unfortunately, I said, yes, it's a good idea, and I'm happy to do it before we talk about whether it's a good idea. So I apologize. Dale, I want to call on each of the board members individually. Dale, what do you think about the idea of setting up a subcommittee in today's meeting?
You know, Peter, I couldn't hear what you said. I'm afraid to raise my hand because I don't want to volunteer for anything inadvertently, and I can't really hear what you just said.
I set up 2 different things. The first thing I should have talked about is, what is your view of setting up a subcommittee for strategic planning at today's meeting?
Oh, no, I think we need to proceed. I'm very interested in seeing if there isn't some possibility for collaboration with the state, because I think that would be a really good thing for all of us. But I believe I'm with Kip. I think we need to proceed.
Okay. The second part of what I had said is, I'm happy to raise my hand as one of the 2 board members on this committee. I wasn't asking you to do a thing, but I both of them.
Well, and I would just like to point out that realistically, I think it needs to be you or Sean or Nina, because Grace and I, both of our terms will end at the end of June, and I'm not sure it makes any sense for us to start something that in theory we couldn't finish.
I understand. I was going to get there in a minute, but that's a good point. Grace, do you think it's a good idea to set up this committee today?
Not really.
Why?
This is the committee that is going to look and work towards this guidebook. I mean, is this the ultimate subcommittee, or is this just to select?
This is to help start identifying what the framework will operate under. So helping identify who would be community participants in this process, looking at, say, this PLA manual, is this the right method we want to follow? The subcommittee members may have experience with strategic planning. They may bring some great ideas that aren't considered here or that we would want to look at. So it's laying the foundation. The actual work of the strategic planning process would be done by the larger team that gets identified through the subcommittee. So how many staff do we want to participate? How many community members? What voices do we want represented on this larger team?
So I understand now better what you're envisioning there.
It's not.
I feel like we're jumping the gun to talk about going, I guess one of my concerns is without seeing what the framework is, I hate to go out to the community and get people involved when we can't tell them what their roles, the time commitment. I don't think we're ready to do that, and hopefully the subcommittee would get a little more organized before we go out to the community. That's a concern I have, right? Saying we're not quite
But
ready.
that I think is what Kit's asking us to do.
Is
is
the
set up-
subcommittee would be involved.
To set a framework right now for going out, before we went out.
Right, we're not going, right.
Okay. So that was my number one concern. And I would like to be on that. And I don't see why you can't change committee members, Dale, as you go along, as things mature and as your jobs change within a committee, which we're talking about a process here of a year or more, and Dale's already recognized that this is a long process. I would foresee that there would be an evolution of that committee and the team that's working it, because there are definitely different stages of strategic planning as you go along. So if I appreciate, do you have any idea when we'd be able to see this guidebook?
I have it right today. I also have a digital copy that I can get out to whoever or I can get it to the full board.
So my concern about not going out to the public until we know what job we're asking them to do to help us, that's really important. These people that we're going to ask to help us are going to be really important to this process. And so you've answered my questions on that, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Sean, what's your feeling?
I'm inclined to think it's a good idea. I also feel like Grace's volunteering for that role would be a great use of her expertise. So I'm all for it.
Nina?
Well, I guess I'm viewing this as maybe slightly differently from Dale, but I'm assuming a lot from Dale's comment. I am sort of envisioning this the way the hiring process should have worked if we were in a normal environment and hiring Kip, which we were not, that you would have a subcommittee that talks about how the process is, reviewing who may want to join, what that looks like, how many meetings it would have, the term of the strategic plan, does that take 6 months or a year? Setting up some of the questions that maybe should be asked, or teeing that up to the committee, and constantly sort of coming in and checking in with the committee, and then moving forward. That may include the entire board to do some of the actual strategic plan. And so if that's what we're talking about today, I'm in full agreement with having 2 members, and I am not going to volunteer, so I will be very clear
Oh,
about
come
that.
on, this is.
Doing it, that they will move forward in figuring out the process for moving forward with the strategic plan. And so I think I'm understanding that right.
Okay, that's what my understanding initially was. I'm sorry that I was kind of wheeling on it. But you're so passionate, Nina, I'm happy to step aside.
No, I will not, no. Thank you.
Yeah, all right.
I'm
all
recovered.
right.
You were delightful.
Therefore, I would like to make a motion based on Kip's request to set up a subcommittee to work on the framework and framing of our process going down the road for the strategic plan that we're going to all be involved with later. And I am going to propose on that subcommittee Grace and myself. Okay, so that's the weird motion. Do I have a second of my weird motion?
I second your motion.
In a second, is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Oh, yep, go ahead, Dale.
You know, I actually think the most important members that contribute to a strategic planning process are the community and the library staff, and the board as the representative body for those two entities tries to help with reaching some sort of cohesive solution that we can all live with, and particularly that our staff can actually use, that is helpful going forward. So I think that this is a good start, and I'm perfectly fine with going ahead with Peter, you and Grace.
Thank you. It will hopefully be fairly short-lived as we can get into the planning process itself when the multi-state effort gets going this spring. But I think that it's great. So there's a motion on the table. It's been seconded. I will call for a vote. These are all in favor of setting up the, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Yep. Do you have more?
I guess I do. In September, we talked about how we would revamp our policy review process. We agreed that we would do 1 to 2 policies per month. It's turned out that that is quite aggressive, and it may just be because we picked some very meaty policies that need a lot of attention, but it's taken a lot of time to get them through management team. Abigail's workload is not just the library, so we can't expect quick turnaround there. So I would like to propose that while we call library policy review continuous, that it is continuous, just that it doesn't get to the board until it's ready. And I can't tell you how often a policy will be coming before the board. I'm hoping that the 2 that have been really weighty will come forward in January, but we're working on them. It's continuous, and we'll get them to the board when we can. So if that is something, a reframing of how we want to do policy review.
You're just setting our expectations, and that's wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah, so we set up that 2 policies a month in an earlier board meeting. So if we just agree at this meeting that it's okay, then we're okay to move off of that, as I understand it. So
Okay.
it's an understandable need, and it's definitely not top priority to do. So we just have to downstream some things as they need.
Okay. Thank you. And the last thing I have.
Yes, sir.
Hiring, always on the agenda, I think. We pulled a lot of recruitment ads in November and December. Just, we weren't getting applicants. We didn't want to just keep the same jobs posted out there. People saying, oh, I've seen that. So we pulled some of our ads. So starting in January, we will begin anew the recruitment for the administrative assistant position. I think there will be some possible positive changes with the county commissioner's new salary and wage survey. I do expect this job will be regraded. higher. So I think that will help make it a little more attractive. We're finally in a comfortable position with James as the IT coordinator, that we are ready to recruit for the IT tech position that we have budgeted for. We just haven't filled yet. And we still have senior library assistant in youth services and in adult services that we have had applicants suggest that they're interested in the position, but not at 40 hours. So we discussed this at management team meeting this week, that we would rather have a body than nobody. And so we looked at what number of hours we could easily entertain for those two positions. And so we want to remain with them as benefited positions. And in talking to HR, we can advertise them as a range of hours. So it'll be a range of 30 to 40 hours. And we'll explain to the applicant what that costs for their benefits. It is prorated under 40 hours. So it would be up to the applicant. I really want to work 32 hours. I know that my benefits are going to cost me 25% of I'm going to contribute 25% of the cost. But we just aren't getting people who are interested in 40 hours, so we would like to try to do that opportunity. And there was also, I guess, at one point in time, there were staff in the library who were working less than 40 hours. They were sort of forced into a 40-hour position. So we will also offer staff the opportunity to apply for something less than 40 if that's what they would like to do. So that's where we are hiring, and all this will start anew in January.
Thank you.
And I think I'm done.
Okay. Maggie, I think, is Maggie still on? Yep. Maggie, we come to the foundation report.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman and Library Board. I'm Maggie Schelling, Acting Executive Director for the Library Foundation. Thank you for the opportunity to share a few updates. I think my first one would just be the annual library benefit happened on December 3rd in person, which we were thrilled. And I would really just want to say thank you to any and all of you who were able to attend and support the library in this super fun way. We raised $100,000, which was right around our budget of $101,000, which is fabulous to support library programs. It's a little down from 2019. We raised $140,000, but as you'll remember, we were at half capacity this year. So hopefully in 2022, we'll get back up to, a little bit greater ticket sales percentage. Honestly, that is kind of what would make the difference. So all in all, I hope everyone had a wonderful time and thank you for your support. Second topic that we're looking ahead to is in January, we'll be meeting with all of our library spenders, the library staff who oversee foundation funds that they spend, as part of their budget. And I'm looking forward to working with them and with KIP to continue our discussions of increasing the information we as the foundation are able to obtain, so our board is able to feel like they're really meeting our fiduciary duties to our donors. So I anticipate that we might explore with the staff what it might look like to imitate a bit more of a grant application process through the budgeting process. So getting a little more information up front on what funds are going toward, and possibly a little more information on the back end of what impacts the funds had. So that's coming up in January. Other update as far as our ED search is going, our search committees put in a ton of time and effort, as you all well know, library board, what that looks like. And they're getting close to, I think, making an offer. So realistically, like, we probably won't see anyone starting till February. So you'll get me at your January meeting too. But that's kind of where we are with that. So as far as priorities, we're looking ahead to our committees and board. We'll be meeting in January, and I'm going to be working on putting together onboarding materials for the new ED. That's coming up. We appreciate the opportunity to attend the tri-board meeting that happened on December 2nd. And it was great to hear the strategic planning discussion earlier moving forward. And I hope later on the agenda, it looks like you might pick up the housing discussion we had. So I'll look forward to hearing where the board goes on that. And then I guess my last note would just be a quick clarification in the financial packet, the reimbursement request to the foundation for November. The sum, I worked with Amber, it shows $8,000, but it's actually $20,000. So the document was just incorrectly summed, I believe, that was in there from the accountant. So we will be cutting a check for 20,000, not 8,000. So that's all I have. Does anyone have any question on any of those updates? Guess not. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you have a good holiday.
Yes, thanks so much.
We have at least two people from the Friends. Who is going to talk about the Friends report? Virginia, are you going to do that, or Dawn?
I would prefer Virginia since she is an officer.
Virginia? We'll let you in, sorry.
I'm unmuting myself.
There you go.
I think you've all read the report that Lori submitted, so I don't have much to add to it, but we think this tri-board meeting process is really very helpful to us, and the communication between the three boards, I think, is spectacular with that new policy implemented. I don't think I have anything else to report that it wasn't in Lori's report, but if there are any questions, I would be happy to try to address them.
Anybody have any questions for Virginia? Well, congratulations on recruiting two new board members, and I know that you would like further contacts from any of us if we have some for future board members as well. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I'm going to be interviewing another candidate today at the library. That's my, if I end up leaving the meeting early, it's because I have a meeting with her at the library, and it takes me about an hour to get down there with the kind of road conditions we have up here. So we may have a 10th person on the board, which will be great.
That would be great. Dale, did you raise your hand? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Virginia.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we're moving on to the board development, which is actually, I'll retitle it for next time, but so we met on December, I think it's the 6th, by Zoom with the BOCC to give them our second quarterly check-in meeting. There we talked about basically the activities that were involved in the library for the prior 3 months. We talked about, we basically highlighted our accomplishments, talked about the board subcommittees that have been formed in the past quarter. We gave them an overview of our plan to update the strategic plan, including what we've just gone through in terms of setting the framework, and then a delay, but hopefully getting involved in the multi-state effort. And then we did give them a heads up onto the potential for transferring the rest of our financial accounting that wasn't done internally, but was given on by Teton to the county, so that they wouldn't have any surprises come January 1st. Kip also spoke about the detailed developments. He provided a report on the detailed developments of what's been going on with his staff in terms of training. And so that's my summary of the BOCC meeting. Dale, do you want to talk a little bit about the tri-board meeting?
Sure. Peter was kind enough to ask me to attend, and I think it's a really good step in the right direction for more detailed communication between the three boards, the Library Foundation and the Friends of the Library. And I also think it's a good opportunity for us to get to know more different people that are involved in those organizations, because sometimes, particularly if you're in the library, you don't necessarily know which part people are associated with. So I thought that was a very good aspect of it also. And thank you, Peter, for asking me.
Not a problem. The one thing I would also point out is this is an informal meeting of all three organizations to allow us to have an open discussion about what each of the organizations is involved in. We do not take minutes. It's not an official meeting of any board. And we're really trying to just understand what are the projects that are and other issues that maybe each of these organizations are dealing with independent of each other, and how we can just be better informed. Dale, I'm going to ask you to talk about the diversity subcommittee because that's next up.
Okay. I did send out a short information piece from Cultivate Ability about the disability awareness for the workplace. I sent it on email. I'm not sure you got it, but it's one page. So if you didn't get it, it won't take you long to look at it. But I did talk to Cedar, who's the executive director, and she feels we could set up a training. And I said to her that we had discussed at the tri-board meeting that the boards of each of those organizations would be involved. And of course, I would hope that the staff also, library staff, could be involved. So she sent me a sheet that details what the cost would be for that, up to 50 people, which would probably cover us. It's $1,000. It includes some initial consultation if you had something particular you wanted to have them address. And it also includes a recording for 30 days afterwards to give people a chance who wouldn't necessarily, it is via Zoom. So you would have some time after for people to catch it up if everyone could come at the same time, which I thought was a good thing. I don't, realistically, we probably couldn't schedule this till after the first of the year. But if the board is interested in going forward, I think we could schedule this one in the near future. I also talked to the DEI collective about their training about diversity. It's called Getting Real About Whiteness. And the collective usually offers this a couple of times a year, and they will meet in mid-January to determine when they would have these offerings again. They said they would discuss at that meeting the opportunity for a specific library program, and they would get back to me, and I will relay that information to the board when I get it, and that won't be until January. The other thing that happened about the diversity effort is I sat down with some of our staff and Kip to get their input about, because our staff has worked very hard in terms of outreach and trying to pull all different kinds of people into the library. So I really wanted to hear what they felt had been, where they had had success and maybe where it hadn't been so successful, and to get their general opinion about diversity on boards, our library board specifically, but boards in Teton County. And some of the things they highlighted for me were that boards, to increase their membership, it needs to be flexible because of a resort town, your working schedule can be all over the place. There was a general feeling among all of us that we needed to avoid tokenism, putting people on a board simply because they happen to fit the right slot, and that one of the things that is very important to follow through with for anybody on a board is training and orientation. And I think we're aware of this. We've had this conversation. I think we realize we need to improve in that area too. There was a very interesting conversation about the workplace as a safe place with stability, with fair wages, with all of the things that provide a good reputation for a workplace, also encourage people to participate on their board. And that was a very, big piece of this effort. So I felt that conversation was very, very enlightening, and I appreciate the opportunity to interact with the staff like that. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. If we obviously talked about quite a bit, so I'm giving you the short course here, but if anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Bill, thank you for doing this work. It's been a lot of work in a short period of time. My feeling is that with regards to the $1,000 cost to try and do CEDAR's training, we probably need to have a discussion between now and our board meeting of how that funding is going to come across and whether we can actually get the friends and the foundations, figure out who is going to be part of that. Is that your idea that as well? I mean, it's going to not be something that we can do before January 1st, I presume. Is that something that you can see happening?
Yes, and I definitely got the impression at the tri-board meeting, Peter, that the friends and the foundation were interested in participating in this. So, and it's my understanding that some of our staff have already done this, as they were involved in a program for cultivatability at an earlier time during the year. So some of them have already done it, but I don't believe the majority of them have done it. So, so it would be good to, of course, try to get as many people involved as possible, try to schedule it. There's probably an opportunity to schedule it a couple of times, because there is a facilitator, and with the facilitator, you can ask questions, which I think is a big plus. So, but yeah, after the first of the year, I don't think realistically we can do anything before then.
So I'm very reluctant to put any more tasks, but I'm going to ask Kip if he could figure out who in his organization, if it's not you, to see if we can pull this together with as many people as possible for an appropriate time after the first of the year. Is that, and including who's going to pay for it and so forth.
Yeah, that's the big piece there. I need to.
All right.
I would just like to interject, this is Virginia Adler, that the Friends are very, very supportive of this effort. And thank you, Dale, for doing the legwork involved in getting things started.
I would just encourage you, as you look at the future, Kip, I'm not sure that January is even required, that put it in a logical time frame. I'm afraid we've got a ballet with too much going on. You've really got a lot going on in January and budget coming up. So as you look at scheduling this, but I have a higher level question. And it seems to me that we are dealing with apples and oranges a little bit here. My understanding of this subcommittee as it began was to seek diversity and more candidates for boards. And Dale talked about that here at the end, Dale, and that sounded good. But what we're talking about here with this diversity in the workplace, it states that this is to create workplaces with authentic cultures of inclusion with a commitment to improving that. So this is diversity in our workplace, but I'm not sure how it fits with getting board candidates with more diversity. So I'm a little lost here. I'm happy to pursue diversity. So Gail, I'm supportive of that. But I would ask that we get a charter for this committee to define what it's doing here. I don't think I've seen that. Has there been a charter that defines the boundaries of this committee and what its goals are?
It's evolving, no, there has not been a written one, but I think in the interest, I think as Dale expressed in prior meetings, it's important before we can understand how we can have a more diverse board to understand what that diversity is. And what our own biases may be going into that, and what we might view as diverse. What I might view, Peter Stalker might view as somebody who would be a great type of addition to this board, not tokenism, but somebody who we're not reaching right now, to whose viewpoint we might want to bring in. We need to identify if there's some blocks in us. That's what I understand your process to be. Is that correct, Dale?
Yes, it is. But I also think it's very important that to recognize that, you know, the board is associated with the workplace. And if you don't have a workplace that is considered to be desirable for whatever the reasons are, you're going to have a really hard time recruiting board members. So that part of these trainings, what they try to do is get you right back to the basics in terms of how is everyone being treated, because that directly reflects on the kind of people that you're going to attract or not, as the case may be. So it's a matter of educating ourselves as a group to try to move forward in, you know, for us, a more specific area, the board. But I don't think we can separate the two and have a meaningful exercise.
So Dale, I would propose that you and I since I'm the other committee member on this with you, that you and I put our heads together, we'll come up with a one-page charter between now and our next board meeting. Does that make sense?
How about one paragraph, Peter? I think a page is maybe a tad overkill.
I meant a page as a placeholder for something short and sweet. How's that?
Okay, that's fine.
Good, thanks for that explanation, Dale. I understand what you're doing better.
Shauna, can I ask you about the IT subcommittee?
I can tell you that the IT subcommittee's work has been ground to a halt with my being absent last month. And I'm looking forward to, now that I'm back, resuming that work as we enter the new year.
Thank you. Less than one page. It's one paragraph. Housing task force. Kip, do you want to talk a little bit about that just for a second or two?
Sure. It was a topic of discussion at the tri-board meeting. The library did an internal survey of staff, a housing survey back in the summer. The results, we've gotten the results. We kind of haven't done anything with the results or anything further around housing in general. There's a feeling among staff that we gave you this information, what are you going to do with it? In the past, and I wasn't around for that, but there was, the board made it possible for a housing task force to exist, which was some libraries board members and some staff members. So I think there's a desire to reestablish that task force, to come up with ideas, to sort of move the conversation forward. One of the things that came up at the tri-board was, how did Parks and Rec get housing built above their shop over on Snow King? And I've talked to Steve Ashworth about that, and his advice, I guess, was that we need to just stop talking about it and start doing something. He said that the approach that he thinks would be worth exploring would be for the library board to ask the foundation to fund an architect to do some schematic design for, say, a housing on the library parking lot. What would that look like? We know it's an important topic. The commissioners are interested in housing conversations. Give them something concrete to look at and just start moving forward. Talking about it isn't going to do anything. My understanding is that the communities like approving spec votes. But the hard part is getting the commissioners and the town council to put those on the ballot. And housing, everybody seems to think, is a topic that would probably move forward pretty easily to a spec vote. But how that might look, after you get to that point, maybe the library foundation says we're going to put up $1 million toward this project, and we get first right to some of the housing in this building. But the sentiment seemed to be that it would need to be housing for town and county employees to be able to have something successful. But that is something that I think the task force needs to look at. Is that something viable? I mean, we all just sort of talk around the topic, and I think maybe reconstituting the task force would sort of push us toward doing something.
Nina, do you have any views on this?
I'd like to hear what others think.
I
I think everyone knows what I think,
Yeah,
so.
I would like to stop talking about this and start moving down a path where we can actually get something in front of people to either throw eggs at or to actually excite them. Because it's
You're
only getting more,
we need to get started.
yeah, it's only getting more expensive. And how would everybody like to proceed?
When you say reestablishing task force, who was on the task force? How was it done before? Kip?
Is Maggie still on?
Yeah, appreciate it.
Hi, Maggie. Were you?
Hi.
You pulled some of those emails and the descriptions of that task force. Do you remember off the top of your head who was on that task force?
I believe it included the library board chair, the library director, a number of library staff, the foundation executive director, and I believe maybe a foundation board member. So it was a decent sized group.
Okay. That's why I'm here.
Co-chairs.
I do recall, I think there were 5 staff on that committee, and I think that's probably too many people. A couple of staff members probably would be representative of everybody.
So may I ask then that between now and our next board meeting, which is January 20th, that we have a proposal for who the members of that task force are, including the members from the library board. And that Kip, again, I'm going to put that on you with Maggie and to put your heads together and then let me know in between. Okay, because we can send a memo out to the board because we're not going to decide it today.
I assume you're on board, Maggie.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you. Board planning calendar, you're talking, Kip, so go right ahead.
There are a few things on the current planning calendar that need to be updated. One of those was the library director review. I believe it had said December, and we had talked about moving that to January. Following quarterly, the dates listed there would be the dates of quarterly, and July would be the annual review at this point in time. The IT services evaluation, I have scratched that off of the planning calendar since we have an operational agreement that we just talked about, and there is ample opportunity in there for monthly meetings and conversations. So if there's anything specifically problematic, it would come to the board, but otherwise it doesn't really need twice a year review by the board.
So on that subject of the IT services agreement, I should have brought it up earlier. Is that agreement essentially your MOU? That checks that box of an MOU with IT?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make
Yes.
sure that we weren't gonna do anything there. And that looks like a self-managing by all the right players, so we don't need to get involved, so
Right.
they're off the agenda here. Could we also take library financials detailed review off the agenda? We look at
We
library
look at those
financials
every
monthly.
month.
And it's more important to focus on the budget things that are on there, so it'd be good to take that off also.
This is kind of bleeding into the board, other matters from the board, but it's something that I wanted to bring up, which is, I am concerned about you and your staff getting burned out with all of the things and how busy you all have been in the last 2 to 3 months with the policy reviews, with everything else that's come up. I am also concerned based on the number of things that, especially given that we're understaffed, that there is not a really good system in place to track the stuff that may have come up at a board meeting 2 or 3 months ago. That might have been a mention of something that we said, oh yes, we'll keep track of it. I am concerned that I am forgetting and things are dropping through the cracks. So you guys are working really, really hard. I wonder if there is a way to get somebody responsible, whoever that is in your staff, just to keep a running document that actually has, this is what we talked about, these are the things that are going on. We need to push this one back because it's, you know, it's like the 2 policies a meeting. You know, they can see that, well, wait a minute, we're getting really backed up. So there's actually a document that tracks all the things that we're doing. And I know that it's been kind of in our heads, it's also been in spreadsheets that we've all done at some point in time. But if we had somebody, I'm not trying to create work, I'm just trying to create a process so we don't miss anything or we don't, you know, we've said we're gonna do your performance review in January, come January, we've forgotten to do it, and that's a silly one. But I'm very concerned with how hard you guys are working, that some things are gonna potentially fall through the cracks. I don't think they have yet, but for us to be able to properly understand what's coming down the road, to have a living, breathing document, that make it easier so that you don't have to have a 2-page director's report, we're just pulling up all the things that have been on your plate, because we can see some of those. And I'm not trying to create more work, I'm just trying to make it actually easier.
I'd like to add to that. I think in our ongoing, and I think our environment is going to be continuing to be disrupted. We have surges, we don't know what all coming. We have to have a plan in place with an intent that we get the strategic plan done, that we do things that your performance goals get worked. And your performance goals were things that you thought were important and we agreed at the time they were put in place. But gosh, more important things have come up. And so Kip, as we talk about this management tool, which to me is a big spreadsheet somewhere, right? Okay, we're on the same wavelength, that captures things like the performance plan items and lets us sort by date, by subject, etc. And that you be able to status that, and we work with it too, basically with our monthly meetings, and that as you status things that need to move out, like there's a performance plan item that we need to move out because it doesn't make sense right now, that information be in that report, and that we incrementally are agreeing with what you're doing in that. That gives us a history of, we had a plan, we changed that plan because no one can hire anyone in Jackson. And I'd like to see us develop a tool that lets us do that incrementally and take the burden off of your onerous narratives for the covering all those items, that we would be able to use that tool and basically move along as things get replanned, as they get status. And that you don't have to do a narrative that says, I completed that. It's in the spreadsheet. You completed that. We all agreed. We moved on. We did that month by month. And so if we make this right, it will make your job hopefully a little bit easier and our job a lot easier. And we can keep rolling our plans as we have to for the environment. That is going to be our world for a while. And so, do you understand it's not a complex thing we're talking about?
Yes.
It's a straightforward database spreadsheet.
I'm gonna ask that you guys sit down
comment.
anyway and look and, and figure something out. that works.
Okay, great. And so if you could just take it from there and bring a proposal back to us and.
He just asked you to get involved, put your head
Yeah,
together.
I'm gonna ask you to come in and check and make sure it's working, it's set up right.
Yeah, I would actually like to write a little requirements and objectives narrative for you. That's the way I think.
Sure.
And so I'll get that to you after the holidays and we can move towards that. Excellent.
Are there any other matters that any board member wants to bring up? Okay, payment of library vouchers. Oh, we're almost there.
Can't believe it. Sorry. Very quickly, I'd like to thank everyone for their help with the review and approval of vouchers last month while I was away. That was great and took a lot off of my mind. Also, I'd like to recognize the hard work that Stella and Kip did last night overcoming a little technical goof in printing the vouchers and checks, which was a real hassle that they dealt with. So that was terrific. And everything looked great. So if I would move that we approve the payment of the library vouchers.
I will second that motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I would move to adjourn the board meeting.
Peter,
Yes, Dale.
I just like and you guys are doing a much better job of this than I am because I'm obviously not there, but I'd just like to give a shout out to Alta and thank them for hosting us and for all the work they do. They are out of sight, but not out of mind. And I also want to give a tip of the hat to their volunteers over there because I know they have really done yeoman's work during the coronavirus epidemic particularly. So I just wanted to make sure we get all of that in because we're not there that much.
No, and I really would like this board to meet here at least once a year, if not more often. Since we have a lot of meetings, we should be able to come over, maybe also in the summertime, who knows? Anyway, thank you very much. We appreciate all your work. Yes.
Can I ask Abigail a quick question? I need signatures on this IT agreement. Does the attest line have to be the secretary or can it be another board member?
Is your secretary not there then?
She's on Zoom.
She's on Zoom.
I couldn't hear that.
Not here, she's on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Can she sign it later this afternoon or something like that?
I'll be back by Monday.
Oh,
Okay.
you're not, okay. You know, let me. I don't think we need to decide that on the record, so let me just double check. No, I think it's fine for someone else to sign it. But I'm gonna go ask Keith.
Okay.
So why don't you, can you guys call me in like 5 minutes after adjournment? And I'll just confirm that that's fine, because that's certainly easier logistically.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
I mean, I wouldn't even hesitate if, Dale, are you the secretary?
Yeah,
Okay, if she like wasn't here at all, right? But
Yeah.
with the Zoom, I'm 99% sure it's fine, but if someone can give me a call in my office in 5 minutes after we adjourn,
Okay,
we'll go ask the master.
can you just shoot an email that says
Yeah,
yes or
that's
no?
fine. Yeah, uh-huh.
Thank
Or
you.
I'll shoot you one, so.
Okay. Thank you.
oh, I don't know where I
I
was.
think we voted.
Yeah, all in favor of adjourning? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. 10:30 again. We'll try to do better next time.